Welcome to the Black Gems Dive In podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into conversations about inclusive cultures and everything DEI. Your co-hosts are Akua and Kendra, and we're thrilled to be your hosts as we explore the crucial topics shaping our workplaces and communities today. In each episode, we'll unpack insights, share stories, and engage with experts to foster a deeper understanding of how we can create more inclusive environments where everyone feels valued and empowered.
Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
Hey, Kim.
Hey.
We are back for another episode, and I know we say that all the time, but we really are back because it's been a minute.
Right.
We have not sat on these green sofas in a while. I think it's taken some time, and we talked about this before, but to truly process everything that was going on and to just take something around the holidays for self.
Yeah.
But we had to come back because there's a lot going on.
Did we have to come back, y'all? There's so much going on that actually I just want to shout out the date because, you know, we might talk about things that will change in a matter of days because that's how That's how quick this news cycle is running. But today is January 28th, y'all. It's a Tuesday. We're recording. So by the time you hear this, there might be updates to what we've already discussed. So I just kind of want to put that disclaimer out there. But we are happy to be back. There is a lot to chat about, especially in the work that we do and especially on a podcast like ours, right? We talk about really important issues, and at this venture, at this point in time, we just know that our voices are needed more than they ever were, right? And this is a lot of stuff that we've kind of pre-warned about, but it's at a point in time where it's time to really chat and dive in.
Yeah. So, but before we get into our topics, we want to reintroduce Kim LaVare. Hey, Kim.
Hello.
Hey. Can you reintroduce yourself for the people, especially our new listeners out there too?
Right. For those of you who don't know, I am the other half of Clementine Gold Group.
That's right.
So I work with Akua on the business side, and happy to be here.
Absolutely.
And so the episode that you were most recently in, I'm trying to think because we talked twice. So there's one on the glass cliff. That she was on, and there was another one, one of our
Drake
favorites,
and Kendrick,
the Drake and Kendrick beef, right? So if y'all want to go back and see Kim in other episodes,
especially before Kendrick hits the Super Bowl stage,
because he is about to embarrass Drake on like an international stage. So just get ready.
Not an international stage, but you're right.
You're right. Absolutely.
You know.
So thank you, Kim, for joining us on these green sofas. So we're going to just, go into our DEI dispatch. So for those who don't know, our DEI dispatch is something that we kind of warn the people about, but also, too, is something that's kind of floated around in the air, but it's immediate, and we want people to know, like, this is happening. Our DEI dispatch, and as Kua said, things happen very quickly.
So quickly.
So it was very hard to kind of choose a dispatch this week.
Very hard.
But this one is kind of hitting home, especially for us here today. So this one is by CBS News. It says Trump signs orders ending diversity programs, federal DEI staffers being placed on leave. So according to the article, it says President Trump signed executive orders Monday and Tuesday that aim to end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs within the federal government. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based, Mr. Trump said in his inauguration speech on Monday. A memo from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management Tuesday evening called for all federal DEI employees to be placed on leave by Wednesday evening. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the move on Post. And it just goes on to talking about the orders will cut funding for quote-unquote, so-called DEI initiatives across the agencies in order to end DEI inside the federal government. They also rescinded numerous previous executive orders and actions from past administrations that aim to promote diversity through the federal government. So this is everything that we've been talking about, and something that Chuck Schumer has said recently, actually today, is this is Project 2025.
Yeah. It is Project 2025, and we've been talking about this. We went to D.C., Congressional Black Caucus, also have a live podcast on that. Kim and I went on What's Next, WBFO's podcast, and talked about Project 2025 and the DEI implications. So there's a lot of places. We'll actually plug those in the show notes, but there's a lot of places where we're having discussions and conversations around what the implications are going to be, and now it's playing out.
Yes.
Right? Like on this main stage where everybody is now recognizing that, there was something substantive, substantive. I can't even talk.
It's a long day.
It's been a long day. But there was something there in terms of what we've been talking about and what we've been kind of, preparing people for. Yeah. So what you got to say in this, ma'am?
Oh, I mean, so much, right? So this executive directive, as we'll call it.
Wait, can you break that down? So we talked about this, about executive orders versus executive directives.
So, a political friend of mine pointed out that we need to call a lot of these. So, there have been like 200 executive directives in like the first 2 days. Mm-hmm. And she specifically corrected me on not calling them executive orders because a lot of them are illegal.
Yes.
So, they can be directives to agencies, but they're not legally enforceable for a host of reasons.
Correct.
This one in particular not only looked to abolish DEI, but it also asked agencies to name at minimum 9 private organizations, whether they were corporations or nonprofits, that they knew were doing DEI work so that they could be further investigated, which, is really problematic because you're looking to, a witch hunt?
That's what it sounds like. That's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah. And it's interesting to me too that this didn't just, there's some nods to this now coming out in the private space, right? Because a lot of the conversations were, okay, at the federal level, we're going to abolish DEI, we're going to, waste and fraud. We're just kind of lumping all those things together. But the reality is now there's nods to say, private companies beware, which is like you have no jurisdiction there in terms of how a private company operates, but you still are putting this out there, right? This directive, essentially, you know.
And we talked about this too, right? Is that there's so much that's being put out there, and so many people are reacting in hysteria. Rightfully so, right? There's so many different emotions that are happening. But when I have conversations with folks and organizations, it's more like you have to know the law, right? Know the law, know what it is, what it says, and the way to move, especially now, because a lot of times. I had the conversation today with the organization, like, should we just abolish it altogether?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's take a step back.
Right.
And not to say that you don't abolish it, or not to say that you don't move however you want to move, but you have to know the law.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's where, again, the executive orders versus executive directives come into play.
And you're already hearing from private sector. So, not jumping into all of the businesses at this point, but there are a few that are coming out really strong, doubling down and sort of saying, bring it on, right? JP Morgan Chase in particular, who, if you will remember, during the first administration, there was some news that maybe Trump might have owed them some money. So the president of Chase made an announcement that he could come for them and they weren't concerned. So you can sort of take that however you think that means.
Yeah.
Where, someone like Apple, they said that they were not changing anything, but not for that reason necessarily, but because this was government overreach.
Okay.
So, depending which way you sort of want to go with things, just looking to see like who's sort of standing firm on their commitment and who
is faltering and
faltering.
Listen, and I think that's a really great point because there's a lot of conversations too where it's like, y'all be careful because if you go down this path and just reverse it, you're not taking into account what's happening in the country already. We talk about this all the time. We're becoming a plurality, which means there won't be a single ethnic or racial majority by 2044, 2045. It's already happened in a lot of larger cities. And so you do this.
I mean, not just that, but when you think of other statistics, so we're talking about at this point for Gen Z, 1 in 5 identify as LGBTQ+.
Okay.
And also the majority of college degree holding individuals at this point are women.
Very true.
So we're seeing a lot of shifts.
Yes.
In a lot of different areas that have.
And I think that's a great point, right? Because the work that we're doing around DEI, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions is about what it even stands for and what it aims to do. And I've heard some really great examples that people have said, like, people try to conflate DEI and civic or civil rights being one and of the same. But one thing that I heard recently was that DEI is a mechanism for carrying out civil rights, right? And so a lot of folks don't realize that this is going to impact a lot of people, right? By rolling this back. So, when we think about veteran population, people who have differing abilities, obviously gender, race, perspective, age is another one,
Yeah, I think what a lot of people also don't think about is children.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you look at 540s, you look at IEPs, you also look at things like least restrictive environments in schools. So, whether you have, an aide, you get OT or PT, occupational therapy, physical therapy in school, or you have some sort of longer test times, any of those things, that would all go away.
Yeah.
So,
and then also too, compounded with all of this, and again, things change so quickly. Today, there was just a conversation about the rollback of federal aid into many organizations and programs that exist, and one of them is going into our schools. We know that schools get a lot of federal aid, and so on top of getting rid of DEI, which we know affects everyone, right? Now you're getting rid of that federal aid as well that also can support some of those services that you receive. So now nobody wins.
Not just those services, but it would take away free and reduced lunch and breakfast. And when you think about the number of children that are suffering from hunger.
Right.
Absolutely.
And how that impacts success later on in life and learning.
Yeah.
I mean, it's detrimental.
It's all stacked up on each other. And also, too, now with everything going on with ICE and the removal of immigrants, and then we have the birthright, all those different things I was reading about. So many kids are not showing up to school.
Yeah.
So now they're not getting their lunch. They could be hungry. It's so much that's going on. But all people care about, the federal government right now, is that top 1%. Everyone's losing.
Yeah.
Everyone's losing.
And I think that's a mechanism that they're trying to employ, right? Because when there's a misconception around what it even is, it allows it to be easily attacked. And so we've talked about defining and making sure that people understand, what this is actually meaning to do. But the reality is they've co-opted the word.
Yes.
And so now we have organizations that we're working with who are trying to decide, do we keep it? Do we stand 10 toes down, or do we shift it, change the language, and have a conversation around that? And so at this point in time, we're just in this really weird space, and every day there's news that's coming out. And so it's just a matter of trying to find our North Star as people who are assisting organizations in doing this work, but also, amplifying the need for it as well.
Especially in our city of Buffalo.
Yeah.
Removal of DEI, federal funding, all this stuff is going to affect cities like it's affecting everyone, but cities like ours.
Right.
But even with the removal of even federal assistance, you have, and something we were going to talk about on today, but it's so far removed from people's memory, but we know that it's still going on, the fires in California.
Yes.
So now you're pulling away the federal aid to helping some of these cities, when we're also have environmental issues that's going on, like we're getting pulled out of the World Health Organization and everything else. It's like something has to give. But, and I know we'll talk about this in a moment, but we have to put systems in place. We have to put these systems that are concerted efforts and that are sustainable in order to push forward.
So one of the things, and just in the conversation, right, because you read what they're talking about as it relates to pulling back some of these DEI initiatives. But one of the things that keeps coming up, and we actually talked about this in a former episode, is this DEI versus MEI, right? And so MEI stands for meritocracy. Was it meritocracy? What is the E? Excellence. And something else, y'all. Now I'm not even remembering what it stands for. But this conversation around meritocracy keeps coming up, and people are, saying, we got to get rid of all this DEI stuff because we're just hiring people who are not qualified for the roles that they're coming in, right?
So MEI is merit, excellence, and intelligence.
And intelligence, thank you. Yeah.
But I think that's not understanding what DEI means, right?
Right.
Because DEI just is removing bias.
Exactly.
Which is legally defensible.
Yeah.
When you look at, when you look at things like, Title VII
Yeah. Yep.
from the Civil Rights Act, it is about removing bias. It is about, making sure that there is a protected class and that you are removing bias. So if we said that we are going to have, blind interviews,
Right.
That's not saying that you're picking one over another because you like them better because they look like you.
Right.
That is removing the bias of you picking someone that does look like you.
Right. Exactly.
So the idea that there is a DEI hire, I really take exception with, because that it's a misnomer. Like this idea that you got something because of what you look like or because of, and also when you think about things like MEI and legacy admissions and hires and all of these things, like there's a lot of issues with even that idea.
Yeah.
So we both pointed.
I know,
we
'cause
were
I'm
in
like-
the screen, but we both pointed at each other because
Yeah.
we saw an article recently. It was around 40-something%
Yeah.
Of legacy students are now in colleges and universities. And also too, we see at the same time as that continues to increase, we see that the admissions of marginalized students are also decreasing at the same time. You see it within, the medical field. You see it in so many different places, which ironically also too, we talked about is that, when it comes to specifically Black women, we are the most educated women on this planet.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. But at the same time, we don't get the same type of recognition or the same promotion or the same opportunities. So it's like these numbers, they're not making sense.
Yeah.
Right. But
so, and because I found that, right, in terms of what Kendra was talking about. So there was a study that came out. It was published by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and it found that 43% of white students admitted to Harvard University were recruited athletes, legacy students, children of faculty and staff, or on the dean's interest list, applicants whose parents or relatives have donated to Harvard. And so one of the things that we talk about consistently is this, to your point, this misnomer of, oh my gosh, and the reality is there are a lot of people that think this way. They think that when you're a person of color, you just automatically get something, right? And so we joke around and say, oh, let me flash my, my Black card because maybe that means I'm going to get something for that. But the reality is that that's not the case, right? So when you think that 43% of white students are coming from these lenses, are we asking enough questions? Why is that the case?
Right.
Why does it matter if your parent came here before? What did you achieve?
Right.
Personally. And this is what the point back looks like. It's like, well, just because you're a person of color, that means that you got something that you didn't earn. When the reality is, we can see by stats that's not the case.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Child.
Take a deep breath.
Yes, a deep breath.
Right. And when you
Center.
layer in things like the fact that most students coming from marginalized populations are not coming in with the network or the resources, but they still have made it into these positions and these sort of opportunities. I think that's why recently on Stacey Abrams' podcast, they said that DEI should be considered doubly earned it.
Right.
Yes.
Because of where you're sort of coming from.
Yep.
And I think that there's some validity to that.
Right,
Very much so.
I mean, that's why we celebrate. I mean, there's so many the names that we don't know, but that's why we celebrate the Michelle Obamas and the Ketanji Browns and I recently saw an interview with Ketanji Brown because she was talking about her role when she was on Broadway. She was a part of Anne Juliet. But she was talking about how she never thought she would obviously get to this point, especially from a Broadway perspective. But she said she remembers the day where she was going to walk out she went to Harvard. And she was going to walk out. But it was another student, another Black woman on campus who looked at her and was like, you got this.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Keep going.
And so this is why we talk about reaching back and we talk about mentoring those behind, or you just never know that one comment, can go a long way to the fact that now she's a Supreme Court justice, right? So those things matter. And so when people ask, like, what can we do you just never know when a small conversation could just go a long way. When you see somebody, who seemingly does not belong, but they do belong.
Exactly. And so, this whole conversation around MEI versus DEI, like I said, go back. I don't remember the exact episode number it is, but we talked about that and went into a deep dive around what that looks like. And there's so many things that are coming out of that research too, to talk about this notion of where does that come from, right? Where there's a feeling of, oh, well, I earned this, but every time we see someone that does not look like you, you know, as a white person, where does that feeling come into play? And so, you know, last night I was doing some more research around that. And one of the things that, you know, came up is this notion of, in this country, and there was a study that's done, and I'll find it and link it as well, but there was a study that was done that talked about how a lot of people think that they can go from, let's just use examples, like I can go from entry level to the CEO, right? And so there's a lot of folks in America, this article and research talked about, that thinks, okay, if I, you know, am in this lower level role, maybe in a couple years, maybe at some point in time, I can rise to the top. And the reality is, to Kim's point, a lot of that has to do with your network. We talk about the network gap, knowing how successful you'll be based on your zip code and the people that are around you. We talk about how, yeah, if you have rich family, friends, you know, parents, your likelihood of success is going to increase that much more. And it goes into detail around specific segments of our population who feel that way. Folks in rural areas who feel that way, folks in cities. And so I think that breakdown was just really interesting to me, because there's I don't know, like the overthought is that, okay, if I'm successful, that's based on just me by myself. And the reality is, we know that that's not the case.
Right. Well, I think also too, right, it's something that has been ingrained in many cultures and many people from the beginning. It's like, oh, I'm gonna pull myself up from my own bootstraps. I think that's been like just a conversation that many people have had, right? But in reality, you know, like, only a certain amount of people can do so. And what's being created right now is more of an economic caste system than anything.
Period. Right.
So as many people think that they can go down from entry level to whatever in their network and all these different things, but what's truly being created, whether you believe in MEI or DEI, is an economic caste system. And where do you fall in that place? It doesn't matter if you are, what race you are, what gender you are, all these different things right now. Oh, it does matter, but a lot of it is going to be, you know, the foundation is going to be economics. So.
Right.
Yeah,
it is. And so there's a lot more to come, you know, in that space, but just keep this in mind, y'all. Like, we've been talking about it for a long time, but the reality is there's a lot of folks who feel that way. And one of the things that you can then do is say, oh, well, you're in this position or place and space, and because you are, this means that you didn't earn it. You're in this position or place, and because you are, that means that different folks have come and taken your spot, and we just know that that's not the case, and that's something that, you know, we need to take into consideration. So,
yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we're gonna move on to our hot topic, and we already started to talk about this a little bit, but it's coming from the Time magazine, and it says that these U.S. companies are pulling back on diversity initiatives. It says a number of prominent companies have scaled back or set aside the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that much of corporate America endorsed following the protests that accompanied the Minneapolis police killing of George Floyd, a black man, in 2020. Emboldened by a U.S. Supreme Court decision that outlawed affirmative action in college admissions, conservative activists have used the courts and social media to target workplace programs. They've targeted corporate sponsorships, employee-led affinity groups, and hiring practices that prioritize historically marginalized groups. DEI policies typically were intended as a counterweight to discriminatory practices. Critics argue that education, government, and business programs which single out participants based on factors such as race, gender, sexual orientation are unfair, and the same opportunities should be afforded to everyone. So when it comes to the companies that are starting to roll it back, y'all, and some of these I know hurt
not
people.
Cool looking at me.
I'm looking at both of y'all.
Don't talk about that.
Because y'all both.
Outfit on today.
Where your outfit from?
My outfit today.
We're
is
not
from
talking
Target.
about it.
Target. And Target is the number one company on this list.
It's the most disappointing.
It's the most recent, and I think the most disappointing. But yes,
y'all both stay in Target, so that's why.
No,
Brandy too.
here's what's most disappointing about Target.
Let me go through the list first.
Look,
and
she ready.
Because I am ready.
We both ready. We sitting on ready. Because I think this is going to be a very great conversation.
Oh, it is, because we don't agree, y'all, which is great. And we talk about
it.
Diversity of perspectives. Okay,
Yes.
so Target.
We partially agree. Let me say that.
We partially agree. Target, where Kendra's outfit is from.
Dang.
So the retailer said Friday that changes to its belonging at the bullseye strategy would include ending a program it established to help Black employees build meaningful careers, improve the experience of Black shoppers, and to promote Black-owned businesses following Floyd's death in Minneapolis, where Target has its headquarters, FYI, if you didn't know that.
Yes.
I know you knew. Target, which operates nearly 2,000 stores nationwide and employs more than 400,000 people, said it would also conclude the diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI goals it previously set in the 3-year cycles. The goals included hiring and promoting more women and members of racial minority groups and recruiting more diverse suppliers, put a little asterisk there, including businesses owned by people of color, women, LGBTQ people, veterans, and people with disabilities. Target also will no longer participate in surveys designed to gauge the effectiveness of its actions, including an annual index compiled by the Human Rights Campaign, a national LGBTQ+ rights organization. It also said it would further evaluate corporate partnerships to ensure they're connected directly to business objectives, but decline to share more details. And so...
And also, let's say who else is on this list.
Okay.
We also have Meta Platforms, which is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram.
And
they also
Threads.
said that they're getting rid of their getting rid of their DEI program, which featured policies for hiring, training, and picking vendors. We also have Amazon. Said they were halting some of their DEI programs, although it did not specify which ones. We also have McDonald's, which I don't eat McDonald's. We also have Walmart. Right, we have Ford, Lowe's, Harley Davidson, which these are
ones that we've talked about.
Yeah, Brown Forman, John Deere. These are things that we've already talked about. Tractor Supply, and also too, they got Jack Daniels. It's not on this list, but I read that.
You remember
Yeah.
Jack
Yes,
Daniels.
and also Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
So, and that's why we had the conversation about Uncle Nearest and things like that. But Kim,
Also-
go ahead.
Kim, go ahead.
Kim has a
because
list. Kim has a list.
Also Trader Joe's.
Sad
Just
about
if you
that.
want to, they didn't make an announcement, but if you search their website, which you also can
Y'all
search
see my
something
finger in
called
this?
the Wayback Machine, and you can see when it used to exist there. Same with Aldi, friends, just
Yes.
BT dubs.
They're same family.
But what upsets me about Target is that Target was riding with us pre-George Floyd, right?
True.
Like 2016, they started carrying,
Yes.
you know, black and brown, you know, brands on their shelves. The HRC piece of their rollback, that is specific to Project 2025.
Correct.
That is a directive from the executive
Directive.
Order.
That came out. So that a lot of companies are doing at this point because they know that that is something that is not legally defensible right now.
Wait, what's not legally defensible?
Being part of like the HRC index.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So
The Human Rights Campaign.
I think that it is harder to pinpoint exactly what will change in Target's plan because you couldn't see their plan publicly before.
Okay.
So we don't know how much of, you know, putting things like, you know, Tabitha Brown or the Lip Bar, any of
Right.
those brands on the shelves, like, was that part of their DEI plan? We don't know exactly at this point because they were carrying them for so long. Was that part of the previous 3-year cycle? And maybe there was a different goal at this point. However, I do take issue with, if you remember, there was some backlash last year from some conservative folks during Pride Month
yes.
that they did not like that there were Pride options for children.
Yes, I do remember
And
that.
then Target responded with a quickness and wiped everything off the shelves, or 2 years ago. And then last year it was only online.
Oh, that's right.
So
Because they were having issues within the store where people were coming in and doing all
Yes.
types of, you know,
Yeah.
so it does feel a little sometimey
right.
Yeah.
on some things.
Yeah.
However, by and large, they were doing much better than many other stores. However, I will say the shopping experience at Target has changed a lot the past couple years. It is not as joyful as it used to be.
Huh.
There aren't as many drops of like exclusive brands and like fun collaborations.
Okay.
So maybe Target needs to look within during these years and just think about themselves.
So,
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Kua.
so, Miss, I got a Target dress on today.
Okay.
So, and honestly, right, like we talk about having differing
Yeah.
of opinions and how that's great because it
Right.
spurs a lot of conversation and discussion. But there's been a lot of conversation online
Yes.
and in the group chats around what people should do at this point in time. And so, you know, there's some folks who have said, Kendra,
So here's my take, right? Of course, right, I was outraged by hearing about Target. Prior to Target, I was outraged about Walmart. Right. I'm not a Walmart shopper. Prior to that, I was outraged about Amazon, right? So all of these different things. It is no secret that I worked for Tesla and I was DEI in Tesla, right? So there's so much that goes into this. And yes, with Target, I do have a Target outfit on because I shop a lot at Target. And so it just happened to be 7:30 in the morning. And I grabbed something out of my closet and I put it on, not thinking because I shop at Target. But here's my take, right? A couple of things. I think that number one, the conversations that people are having about Target, Walmart, Amazon, all the things are happening on meta platforms. Mm-hmm. Are people stepping back and saying, I'm not going to be a Facebook user, Instagram, Threads user, right? So that's number one. And this is not an attack on anybody or anything like that, right? It's like, how we're trying to get the word out. We're still using the platforms at which people decide to roll back some of these DEI initiatives, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. Also, two, as Kim talked about, you have the Tabitha Browns, we have the lip bar. Most people have seen the video, right? And Tabitha Brown was saying to go and still support the Black-owned businesses. Mm-hmm. Now, when it comes to that, she was also saying that there are some Black-owned businesses in Target that have a smaller platform than her, right? And they may not necessarily have an option to do go straight to their platform to purchase, mm-hmm. right? Like the lip bar, whereas they said, come to us directly, right? Come purchase from us directly. And I completely agree about that too. I think that, what I wish Tabitha Brown also would have said is, guess what? Those who don't have the option right now or don't have necessarily their business together to go directly to their platform to purchase, let me help you. Let me mentor you. Let me talk mm-hmm. to you about how do we get there, right? I think that's a part two to Tabitha Brown's conversation. And I know we'll talk about this too, but I think, where we are in the age of consumerism and capitalism, it's very hard to kind of just completely take a step back and say, I'm not supporting any of these businesses. Because guess what? We all have Amazon Prime. We shop at Target. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We're on Threads. Mm-hmm. What I do think is what we should do is that collectively, come together and support Black-owned businesses like we've always been doing, but now put systems in place so that when things like this happen, we could say, all right, no sweat off our back. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go to such and such, and I'm going to such and such. And these organizations and these businesses exist, but we have to continue to uplift them, right? Here in Buffalo, we have that brown bag. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's so many organizations that Chantel has come together and put together in one place for us to come and support, which we'll continue to do. But now how do we support those businesses to continue to build them up systematically? So again, these things happen and there's no sweat on our back. Mm-hmm. So for me, when it comes to Target or whatever, I'm going to take a second look, right? But where I stand right now, I am not going to fully roll back, but I also will continue to support Black-owned businesses. And then hopefully one day I can phase out Target out of my life, right? When it comes to clothes, I love the collective, mm-hmm. but I will say I am taking a second look at when it comes to clothes, right? But when it comes to maybe groceries or something like that, that's just where I shop right mm-hmm. now, mm-hmm.
I mean, Wegmans still has a good plan.
I mean, I go to Wegmans too. I do Target, Wegmans, Trader Joe's, and Aldi, right? But here's the thing. I do all of it, right? But I also too am still supporting Black-owned businesses, and I will continue to support Black-owned businesses and help systematically build up those businesses so that I don't have to rely on the capitalism and consumerism that engulfs our country.
Yeah, and I'm just going to preface it, obviously this is a banter back and forth type of thing, and so I appreciate your points. I think they're very thorough in terms of, how you're thinking about this. But I just got when I think about it, and granted, right, there are still platforms that I'm on. I'm still on, and I'm just gonna put this out there. I am still on meta platforms, Facebook, Instagram, as well as Threads. Threads, I definitely went over there after Twitter, mm-hmm. X, formerly known as Twitter, mm-hmm. Started to kind of go haywire, right, mm-hmm. from that perspective. And so at this point in time, it is difficult to just say, okay, today I'm going to be done with every single thing, right? Because this is ingrained in how we do business, right? My business is on these platforms, and this is also how we get the word out around, how we operate. So I want to put that asterisk there, and it's not as easy to just say, forget it. But there are some people who, Amanda Seals, I'm just going to put that out there, who said, I'm giving y'all a week, and then I'm out of here.
She said February 1st.
February 1st, I'm out of here. I'm going to leave this platform. I'm tired of these businesses playing in my face. And we got to take a stance somewhere, right? And so that's kind of the space and positioning that, I'm at this point, is that I'm tired of people playing in our faces for generations, and we sit here and say, oh, well, at least they did this. At least Tabitha Brown could, be successful because she was in Target and, had millions that she's probably made because being in a big box store like that. The issue that I have is that we're not, as a collective people, always ready to make a sacrifice, and we got here based on sacrifice. People had to sacrifice. So if that means, like, I'll give you an example. I was going to buy a book the other day, and I literally went to go to Amazon and said, no, I know of 2 businesses locally here in Buffalo who I can order that book through. Stephanie Pete, her bookstore, and then also Zawadi Books, right? That's a Black-owned bookstore here in Buffalo. And so at this point in time, it's making a concerted effort, and then also realizing, like, no one's going to change unless we force them to change. And there's been plenty of examples in history that we can look back and glean from. In 52 weeks of finding alternative transportation, walking to work because of that bus boycott is then when it's, they almost crumbled the entire system, and people started to pay attention. As a collective, Black people we're one of the biggest consumers, right? And they've even compared our spending and our expenditures based on other GDPs of smaller nations at the end of the day. So if we all collectively say, you know what, 52 weeks, that's a long time. Even if we said a few months, we're going to just, stand side by side and say no more, it's going to make people move. And then the other thing, so that's number one. Number two, when I think about this, that is an optional decision. There's other companies that we've talked about and will talk about that are still standing 10 toes down. Costco, Apple, Ulta, where I get my makeup from, y'all. All these organizations have said no. And that's also because they realize that diversity is good for business. And so I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to stand 10 toes down and say, no, this actually helps us, and we're going to put this on Front Street. And so my thing is, it's interesting, like a company like a Target, and we're just picking on Target, but obviously we've read through, other companies in here.
It's because they broke our hearts.
Target was the one, and I like Target, don't get me wrong, because I've gotten, clothes. They have plus size clothes, y'all. Like, it's easier to shop there because it is more inclusive from that standpoint. But I will say, y'all didn't have to roll it back like that. You know what I mean? There could have been a different way to navigate that, even if you needed to massage language and change it. I'm not saying like pull the wool over people's eyes, but when you make this public announcement that, we're done, like pack it up, that is a choice. That is a choice. And it's also my choice where I spend my hard-earned dollars at the same time.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on all the points in terms of the concerted effort, because we see that, when this happened in history and in the past, there has been huge changes that have shockwaves. I mean, right after George Floyd, the pendulum shifted. This is why we're in this situation, like where we are, very right? True. So we saw that what we can do as a people, as well as allies, come together, right? So we know what it can do, and I think we're kind of talking the same language in terms of like, stand 10 toes down, right, and continue to support the Black-owned businesses, continue to support other marginalized businesses as well, right? And then also too, at the same time, like, how do we put the systems in place so that we don't have to do this again?
And so, because I still got a couple of points.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I done went 1 to number 3 because you had an example. And so I was like, let me just counter that. Because one of the things that you talked about was Tabitha Brown, right? Like, why other businesses they might be a little bit smaller and not able to leave, but I got an example, y'all. And this is the company called Oh Happy Danny. And she posted an update on our working relationship with Target. Yesterday, we began the process of removing our remaining products from Target shelves. Since we were originally slated to be in the journal section for a while longer, we're unsure how long it'll take for our products to fully phase out of the stores. This decision wasn't made lightly, especially since many of you first discovered Oh Happy Danny in Target aisles. However, our brand has always been built on the very principles that have recently been rolled back by this company. Staying true to our mission means moving forward in a way that aligns with our values. We also recognize that not all brands are in a position to make this choice so quickly. Transitioning away from partnerships like this requires time, resources, and community support. While we're deeply grateful for a community in particular set of circumstances that allow us to weather changes like this, many businesses will need additional continued support as they plan their next steps. While talking about supporting Black businesses is popular, we hope that this is a season of actively showing up for them. Thank you for standing with us, family. Our good work is far from over, right? So I just wanted to give an example. This is a smaller, company who is saying, this is our values, our morals. We stand 10 toes down, and we're going to move away from it. Tabitha Brown has been very successful, right? We talked about the Lip Bar with Melissa Butler, the owner of that, and she also made a post where she talked about, listen, y'all can shop us anywhere, directly, direct consumer, online. You can go to other stores that we're featured in, and you have a variety of different options. But I think this goes back to what you were saying too, and where we definitely agree is there's a collective need for us to start to focus our attention to getting ready to be able to do this on our own. Right. I don't want to make light of that situation where it's easy just to, dust your hands off and say, I'm done. But we can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result.
No, but I also think it's really difficult because, Walmart, Target, Amazon have such a monopoly
and
on
bought
everything.
up the mom and pops.
Because, even when you watch Tabitha's video, her stuff is carried in Walmart, Target, Amazon. Like, you can't really just buy it randomly.
Yeah.
When you talk about some of the other brands, they still say like, oh, you can get us at Amazon, even though Amazon is also problematic for a lot of reasons. So it's sort of like having an alternative, but it takes a lot to create that alternative.
Right.
In terms of having like customer care and a warehouse and like, drop shipping and all of that stuff to sort of, create that sort of stuff. So I think that it can be done, but it would need to really be supported, and not just in larger cities that get the traffic, but like it needs to be supported the way that Amazon is.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's also the other conversation is we need to think before we, just buy and consume. And honestly, there's another conversation around
about
consumerism in general and kind of where we're at. But ultimately, I think we all want the same goal. We want, businesses of color to be successful, right? Black-owned businesses to be successful, women-owned businesses to be successful. But we as a community need to really, come up with a larger plan. I know locally we've talked about things and we've started to implement some things. But again, shout out Chantel. There's other ways that you can get what you need versus the convenient and easy way of clicking a couple buttons and it arriving at your door.
Right. Yeah. And I think, this goes back to, we talked about this probably on season 1 or 2 of our podcast, but it goes back to like some of the communities, right, of Black Wall Street. We were talking about Beacon Hill in Boston as well, and creating our own, from schools to churches to grocery stores. There's so much, and even shout out to Rooted, who just recently opened. Rooted
in Love.
In Love, yes, who just opened.
Tisha Parker,
their grocery store. I mean, so there's things that are happening, right? We just have to continue to amplify those things and support. Like, what does that look like? And make sure that it's accessible. And also, too, speaking of accessible, we talked about this recently offline. Hillman University on TikTok.
Oh, yes. Hillman Talk.
Right. And so I went down my little rabbit hole today on Hillman Talk as well. But again, when, it's for people who don't know, many people are talking about making sure that things are accessible. So whether it's from educational perspective, whether it's beauty initiatives, there are people who are on there giving a wealth of knowledge. But the next step, right, is let's create our own platform, right? And put that information on the platform, right? So that is the next step. That's what I'm talking about, being systematically smart in terms of like the next steps, right? Because I think it's a beautiful thing. We want it to continue to grow, but we saw TikTok had a 24-hour shutdown, and what if it happens again?
Right.
Then what? Like, we're going to go to the next platform. So we have to make sure that we're continuing to support these initiatives, but also building up for like the next part in phase 2.
Yeah.
You know?
There is a little bit of breaking news as we've been sitting here. And I'm
No.
only saying this because it relates to what we do, right? And so this is coming from the Hollywood Reporter, which, you know, it says that the White House says it is opening briefing room to podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators. So the press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, announced that the new policy was going to happen during her first briefing, which was today. And so to your point, in terms of how we're looking at social media, how we're positioning our learning and education based off of that, we've talked about as podcasters, there's folks who will, you know, chime in and say, hey, really like your episode, and are listening to our take on the news. But like we talked about before, everyone has a bias, right? And so you are getting our opinions on what we think is happening. We try to give you just different facts that you can glean into, as well as different sites to do your own research at the end of the day. But these changes are coming into the Brady briefing room in the West Wing of the White House. She said that they're going to open up the briefing room to independent journalists, podcasters, social media influencers, and content creators, and will be creating a dedicated seat in the first row for new media. Trump, of course, leveraged new media to great effect during the 2024 campaign, appearing on podcasts hosted by the likes of Joe Rogan, Theo Von, and Nelk Boys, in addition to more traditional TV appearances at his victory party at Mar-a-Lago. The UFC CEO Dana White called out some of the podcasters by name. And so I'm just putting this out there because it's going to be more and more difficult for us to get unbiased information from folks. And I don't know what y'all got to say about that. We didn't even talk about that before, but it just related to what you were talking about, you know?
Yeah. I listened to part of the briefing today because I just kind of want to see who she was, who the new press secretary was. It was very hard to get through it because they were talking about this great America, this new America, new golden age, and all those different things. I think, you know, to your point, the rhetoric and things like that is going to be harder to sift through.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about how media is targeting certain demographics and the way they're targeting them. So now adding on, you know, the briefing room, adding on podcasts and things like that is just going to be more inundated with this non-biased view of things.
Yeah.
And so it's really important, again, for us to continue to build our own platforms and also to continue to support one another, right? So if we're seeing something that we're like, oh, this is dope, the way that they're putting out this podcast, whatever the case may be, of just information, we need to continue to share that too, in different ways, whether it's social media, whether it's bringing people onto conferences, whether it's whatever the case may be. Like, what I start to see too a lot on social media is, of course, you know, we have a lot of conversations and we talk about polarization and the polarizing of people, even, you know, within similar groups. Like, you know, we're sitting here today and having great conversation. We may not necessarily always agree, right? But we also hear what each other has to say. And I think when it comes to just having those conversations, it's really hard sometimes on social media, but we have to continue to uplift each other. Because what's going to happen is going to be more and more what I'm calling foolishness being put out. But we have to, we can't keep just going at each other. We have to rely on each other. It's the only way we're going to get through this next 4 years.
And I think that makes a good point because, and there was a whole hysteria. I know we all had those conversations around, why am I following this person? I wasn't following them before, right? And there was a lot of conversations around that. Because I had opened up my Facebook literally the day after the inauguration.
First thing that I
saw was like a picture of JD Vance, you know, who's our vice president. And I was just like, when did I ever follow JD Vance? And so some folks have said, oh, well, they poured it over the old social media tags from, you know, whoever. And now this is what this is. But one thing that I do want to highlight from a news perspective is, you know, White House on Instagram, right? So the White House page used to be a place where press secretaries would, post direct information that came from the White House. It was, their way of saying, hey, this is the updates that the American people need to know. You would see that on Facebook. You would see that on Instagram. 2 days, maybe after the inauguration or a day after, I open up Instagram and the White House page is now having clips of Fox News on the page as official information that's coming out from the president. And so there's things that are being pushed and tested in ways that we've never seen before. Some folks probably, who have supported love that. They love that there's a difference in what that looks like. And other folks are like, what is this foolishness, to your point? So I think that we're in an unprecedented time. I can say that we've had many conversations with each other, with people who do this work, and they're really scared. They're nervous about what's to come. But the reality is we're going to be bombarded with so much information. And this has happened even when he was president, before. And so we're in a stage where we're going to have to be really diligent to sift through things, to find sources of, truth and facts.
And that is going to be extremely difficult, especially because going back to Meta, so many people are on these Meta platforms, and fact checking is no longer a thing. No longer. Right. And there's times I'll open up, I'm like, is this even real?
Right.
Like, and I have to go and look at a source, and I'm starting to see it now, especially with that in the age of AI. There's so much that's just like, this is not it, right?
Yeah.
So we have to continue to search for the truth. We have to continue to educate, right, and not be co-opted by whatever this education system is going to be. Or I mean, and there are education systems, let me not downplay, there are education systems out there who are doubling down. I mean, New York City, things like that. But we have to continue to find the truth and the light. Sound like I'm at church, but that's what it comes down to.
And we just put out there, all algorithms are different, right? Correct. And that is very powerful, and those are being controlled by these, media moguls. And we talked about Facebook, Meta, obviously, that has Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and so at the end of the day, we're all getting different sources of information. So being a researcher would be very helpful these days, to be able to research, go back, make sure that things are factual and coming from reputable sources, which is going to be even more difficult, I think, in the time to come.
That's why I love me some Henry Louis Gates, boy.
Right.
Speaking of, he has The Great Migration comes out tonight.
Oh,
okay. Yes, on PBS.
Yes.
Okay, shout out PBS.
Yes, I'm excited for it. But anyways.
All right, so y'all know what time it is. It's time for our gem of the day. Our deep dive was really...
It was deep.
It was deep.
It was deep.
We went over a lot of different things, but gem of the day. Anybody want to go first?
I'll start.
Okay.
Because we talked about this before, and so everybody know I'm a basketball fan, and so it was recently reported that Dawn Staley's $25 million extension contract makes her having the richest salary in women's college hoops history.
Love it.
That's a celebration.
That is a celebration.
That is a celebration. So Coach Dawn Staley received a contract extension on Friday last week that South Carolina said will make her the highest paid college women's basketball coach of all time at a total value of $25 million. She signed the contract, for 2029 and 30 season, earning $4 million a year to start with the annual $250,000 escalator. And so it says that Dawn Staley is a once-in-a-generation coach who has made a tremendous impact on the University of South Carolina. Athletics Director Jeremiah Donati said in a statement, she has elevated the sport of women's basketball on the national level and here on campus, and I'm excited that she will be representing the university for many years to come.
Love that.
Dawn Staley, y'all, is the GOAT.
Yes.
And, I just want to meet. I have met Dawn Staley when she was playing in the WNBA years ago, but shout out to her. I mean, being a black woman, being in the game of basketball, women's basketball for NCAA is not easy. And, she definitely took this team from, I think they only won her first year 10 games to now being number one in the country for the past couple of years. So shout out to Dawn Staley. That was definitely a gem that we wanted to share, and something we talked about too recently is just to give you guys some joy. Get some joy.
Yes.
Like a lot of stuff we talk about is very heavy.
Yeah.
you know, and so we want to bring you also to joy in this podcast
Yeah.
and celebrate, you know, the wins that we do have. And I know there's going to be more wins to come because we are going to band together as a people.
Right.
But yeah, that was my gem, and I just wanted to share that because I love me some Dawn Staley.
I love it.
Yeah.
Right. And a joyful note.
Yes.
Love that as well. So my gem of the day is coming from Brittany Packnett. And so she's Miss Pack Yeti on Instagram and Threads. And she said, please remember, the goal is for us to be overwhelmed and perpetually distracted. They want us to react to everything while they pelt things at us nonstop. Resist the urge to doom scroll. I'm going to say that again because it's hard to. Resist the urge to doom scroll or feel like you have to boil the ocean. You have gifts, interests, talents, and expertise that can be targeted and focused. Do your work. Don't leave it to someone else, and don't try to do it all at once. Do the next right thing because we're going to get through this. And I love that because it's about doing the next right thing. We talk all the time about every single thing that's popping up. Oh my gosh. But at the end of the day, we can only control what we can control.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that we won't be able to control, but there are a lot of things that we can.
Yeah.
Starting in your own community, you know, think about the youth right now. We need to pull back and bring them up in the conversation so that they can also be informed about what this looks like. But at the end of the day, don't get stuck in the, you know, over sharing of information and the burden in that, but make sure that you're just doing what you can do. And so, y'all, we got to make it through. We don't have a choice. I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of stuff to come, but stay true to yourself and do what you can do. Do the next right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my gem.
That's
What
nice.
you got,
That's
Kim?
nice. So I think my gem's going to be about building community because I think it's going to be really important these next couple of years to find your community, because I think a lot of the things happening are to divide us and to sort of make it seem as though you're going through this like by yourself or, you know, that all of the supports that you have sort of normally had are like not available any longer. So my gem is actually from Helen Keller.
Okay.
And it is alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much.
I love that.
Plain
And I
and
think
simple.
that's a great note to end on because, yeah, we together.
We together. You can't get rid of me.
Exactly. And so we often have these conversations and keep each other informed, but at the end of the day, you know, we got a resident person that in Kim.
Yes.
Keep bringing her back to have more discussions. But this season, whatever season this is,
Yes.
and whatever episode this is, we're really excited because we're going to start to bring some voices from outside. And so there's one in particular that I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
And so you'll see what that looks like pretty soon.
Yeah. So we're going to also try to share more information too outside of our podcast.
Yes.
So definitely follow us on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and also LinkedIn. So we're trying LinkedIn, y'all. So Cool and I will be alternating with different articles every week, and then also two things that we want to share as well. So make sure that you go and follow us on LinkedIn. And talk to us, y'all. So we're excited to be back because, again, there's no shortage of information.
Sure not. So like, subscribe, follow, all the good things, and we'll see y'all next time.
Absolutely.
Peace.
Bye.